Remembering to record. So happy to be back. Welcome everyone to Access Your Inalienable Sovereignty in 2021. I've been away in Italy and not able to find myself awake at the time in which we normally do this, but I'm so excited to be back, and what a way to re-enter with Sianna Sherman, who is our guest today. And I've had the privilege of interviewing her previously. I just want to introduce her to you. Sianna Sherman, she goes by she and her, is an international yoga teacher, training tens of thousands of students and teachers for nearly 3 decades. As the visionary of Rasa Yoga, mythic yoga flow, and ritual, Sianna shares her voice in the way of community and collaboration. She's a gifted storyteller and awakens the imagination through the language of the soul. Dedicated to embodied wisdom, social justice activism, anti-racism, unpacking her own white privilege, shadow work, mantra, ritual, and tantric yoga philosophies, Sianna brings a genuine presence to every offering with humility, devotion, and deep care for the collective. In addition, she has extensive training in body work, functional anatomy, wild crafting, and earth-based wisdom. She leads Rasa Yoga teacher trainings, alchemical arts for sacred sisterhood, pilgrimages to sacred sites, and is the co-host of the Fearless Heart Activation series with her beloved Masood Ali Khan, to inspire courageous conversations and brave space for real transformation in these times. When she's not teaching or dreaming up community activations, Sianna will most likely be somewhere outside in nature or cuddling up with her family. Well, I can completely relate to all of that. No wonder our paths cross. It's such an honor to have you here, Sianna. Welcome.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here with you. And just thanks for being a friend and for inviting me into your group. Everything that I've ever, sort of collaborated in with you has really brought a lot of joy to my heart. And so I'm so grateful for you, and thanks for all your dedication and all.
Thank you. A sacred mirror in many ways. In fact, I just did one of the first things that I did in Italy was a sacred pilgrimage, and it was profound. So I totally relate to that, to making pilgrimages to sacred spots and being in sacred communion with the earth. That's such a powerful part of my practice, and yours too. And I'd love to just invite you to share a little bit about, why do we do that? Why would we do such a thing?
Oh, thanks for asking. And are you able to share where you went?
Yes. Yes, I was in where the pilgrimage took place was an area called Traversella in northern Italy in the Italian Alps. And there's a little ancient Roman village. And if you hike up enough, which I found out later, which is where I did the pilgrimage, there are Celtic and or Druid homes.
Wow.
Some
Wow.
of them are still intact, and it looks like people live in them still. It was really like I felt like I was in another dimension in this like
Mm.
profoundly beautiful place, and feeling the many generations of people who had lived there. It's just incredible.
Wow. Wow. I will one day maybe I get to follow in your
Yes,
footsteps.
yes.
Well, and since we're starting with Italy, I am a lover of the Black Madonna in particular, and
Mhm.
have been since my early 20s. And a few years back, I went with a great teacher of mine, Alessandra Bailoni, who's a very well known tambourine player of the ancient ways and of the priestess ways. And so we all went on a Black Madonna pilgrimage throughout southern Italy, and really praying and singing and with the earth and honoring the old ancient understanding of the mother as the power of fertility and the dark earth and this deep, embodied rootedness of our being. And so I feel that being in pilgrimage to these sacred sites is really about embodiment and grounding and rooting and being with the earth and visiting in the way of like deep humility for all of the ways that have come before, and especially for the indigenous peoples of the various sites that we might feel in resonance with. And so to arrive in a completely humble, deep listening, receptive way, and bearing gifts and bringing the perhaps physical gifts and bringing our songs and our words and our embodied prayer, our dances, the tambourine, whatever it might be, and contributing to the energy of that land and what it holds, and to be very humble and to receive, and to then in a certain way, um, allow ourselves to weave into the sacredness of the lineages that have been holding this for so many, thousands of years prior. And to really ask ourselves then, how am I coming into resonance with this, and what contribution can I make, and how can I study deeply, so that I'm not just trying to take something from this place, but rather, what can I offer? And that this is really, and then in this way, it that we are changed, and through our humility, our receptivity, and our willingness. For me, priestess is always about strengthening our vessel to really serve, to serve fully and with extraordinary presence in our being and humility, but being with the earth and actually being in our physical bodies, because our body is the temple, and then we bring our body temple to these temples, and that's the interconnected, love making of our own body temple with these temples of the earth and pilgrimage sites, and we are woven together.
I love that. I love how you put it so beautifully. I as well am really, really tuned into the pleasure and the magic of coming with offerings, coming to offer instead of to take. For me, it's the difference between being on a pilgrimage and being a tourist. Going to these places with the intention of how I show up in my presence to be worthy of the sacred communion, to give thanks for what's being offered in the way of the life-giving elements that are all around. And it feels like being reminded to do that, which I was very strongly from my teacher, Martine Prechtel. So much opens up. I felt like I was in another dimension. I feel like I'm in another dimension when I remember to come into sacred, beautiful places that way.
And I just remembered that, we one of the ways we found each other in a certain way was through Martine, not physically, but Martine was a great teacher of mine as well, and of the Flowering Mountain. And so that just again brought a whole new big smile inside my being. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the pieces that he teaches that I feel woven into your work and mine is the holding of the full spectrum, the beauty and the remembering of the sacred ancestral indigenous ways, and that awakening to how far we are away from it. And instead of getting overwhelmed, to be committed to making beauty and to try to continue to show up in an offering way, amidst all of the reasons for grief.
I always remember Martine, making opening prayers and asking, in the way, that most eloquent way that he has, of just being humble and to be worthy, in this moment as we make the offerings. And it's, such a channel to really get out of our own way, and really with the surface of ego, like what the surface of the ego thinks it's going to gain from any particular thing, and just to surrender that and really show up in the way of being a channel, and to see how spirit flows through each of us in the moment, so that we can bring our expression and creativity and gifts and magic through. And then together, when we show up in these ways, we can be re-inspired to reimagine a world that really can hold um, collective care and mutual responsibility, for the greater whole. And so, yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah. And that what you were sharing touches upon for me what inalienable sovereignty is, which is we can't claim sovereignty if we're not taking 100% accountability for everything we're manifesting consciously and unconsciously. And so much of that lately, as far as, trying to unpack our white privilege, includes things that are happening in our world to people who've been written out of the system, written out of, those old ancestral ways, those indigenous ways being attacked, and the attempt to annihilate, actually, and, really trying to bring that back into balance. And I know that's a really strong piece in your work too. And I'm curious about your journey with that.
Mm. It's a humble journey, and one that I commit to every single day with all of my being. And I have a commitment inside myself to very deep shadow work, so that I can lean in to big discomfort. And in this great unlearning process, and with a lot of humility, there every single day, I'm I make the attempt to lean in to the most uncomfortable situations, and to just stay committed, because entire peoples um, are not only erased but killed, and constantly killed for being human beings. And so I am always, in remembrance that privilege is, it's something that, it's the things that we don't have to go through. It's of course we all go through so much that is difficult and challenging. And then with proximity to power through our privilege and social location identities, there are just certain things that, for me, as a white, cisgender, heteronormative, um, able bodied, English speaking citizen, educated, et cetera, there are just so many things that I will never have the lived experience of. And so I remind myself of this, because that if I am really committed to being humble, listening, and of service, then what am I in service to? And that is for the liberation of all people. What will that require? Well, it's going to require me, in particular, speaking for myself, to super lean into highly uncomfortable moments, and to be willing to show up in a way that is willing to dismantle white supremacy, and decolonize my own mindset. And that will then often include naming the ways that I benefit, and then surrendering those as well. And so it's deep and humble, and I am committed to doing better every single day.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that there's a lot of fuzz. I think it's on my end. I don't know how or why, but I apologize to anyone who's having a hard time listening in. Mercury in retrograde loves to make herself, himself, themselves known in my life. But
Just a
when
couple
one,
more days. Just a
I
couple more
know,
days.
I know. One of the things that you shared is, asking the question, what am I devoted to? And for me, that's one of the guiding lights for the archetype and the embodiment of the priestess who is in service to something greater than herself. And I think that's a beautiful one to presence on a regular basis, and not just around race, but you mentioned quite a few things around being cisgendered, around having an education, around speaking English, around being able-bodied, and that requires stretching our minds to really see the people and the realities around us and step outside of what often we're put in, like from scarcity and fear and survival that gets activated from all that's happening in our times. It can be easy to pull in and just see our own little, like, this is what I need to survive. I don't have bandwidth for anything else. And I've found that the more I'm willing to not worry about those pieces so much and show up as a priestess, a true priestess, asking how I can be of service, listening and responding to that, whether it makes financial sense or not, is what's most important. And it's been so rewarding.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for you, Amanda. Thank
Oh,
you. Yeah,
thank you.
truly.
Thank you. Well, I know that that's your path as well. And I'm curious about the retreats that you do, and because you go all over the world, and I would love to hear a little bit about what you're doing in those retreats, and how your mission is showing up in your work.
Well, at the moment, I have not traveled since March of 2020. And so I will probably re-emerge next year. I would say that I'm kind of like in the I've just come out of a chrysalis, and I'm at the point of being like that the butterfly. Like I have the wings and the little antennas, so I'm out of the chrysalis, but I'm still kind of like wet and damp, and I haven't pumped the fluids through the wings and not quite ready to lift off into the air yet, like right before the butterfly. There's a
Yeah.
few things that have to happen. So I have really turned way in. And the last place that I was um, was India. And I was in a collaborative experience with fabulous teachers in Rishikesh. And then I went on pilgrimage to a land that I've been waiting to be on pilgrimage with for decades, and that's Kamakya up in Assam, India. And it's the land of the Shakta Tantra, of the goddess,
Mhm.
and of the Dasha Mahavidyas, of the 10 great wisdom goddesses. And so, including, Lalita, Tripura Sundari, and Kali, and Bhuvaneshwari, and Shodashi, and Kamakya. And so, this was the last place that I was. And on the last night, and it was the full moon, known as Holi, where it's, the festival of colors and all the colors. And I was with a group of women, of Indian women, and some Western women, and mostly Indian women. And I have a friend who lives there, and we all sat in circle through the entire night of Holi with this full moon right next to the temple.
Wow.
And we were chanting all night long the 1,008 names of the goddess, like as in this circle of women. I could cry, like it was a dream come true for me. And as I came back to the States, 3 hours after I landed, and Masood came, my beloved, came to pick me up, the borders were closed. 3 hours after, and that was the last travel for me, other than seeing my parents and sister in Kentucky through this time, and because my parents have both been dancing through the gateways, as they are, my dad and 90 years old, and my mom approaching. So I will probably reemerge sometime next year, but when I am in pilgrimage. So uh, sometimes I go just with other friends. Sometimes I go solo. Sometimes I take a group with me if it's a place that I feel like in very deep resonance with, and that I personally have been to many times with gifts and offerings. So I typically don't just go somewhere with a group of people, without really preparing myself over a long period of time. So, but when I go to these places, for me, it's about prayer and connection and a reconnection and like a recalibration is what I want to say. So, like, just as we go through life, we need like these cosmic tune-ups. And I think that this is the thing, when we go to places that we have deep resonance with, it retunes us and it refines us and it helps us, to get really clear and crystallized in our lives and our psyche. And also, they can be very initiatory. And sometimes we don't see this coming. Like sometimes we go to places that hold big charges and big energy, like Kamakia. And I can tell you, when I landed home, I went into a series of initiations
Yeah.
through the dream world, through mantras, through all these gateways. Sometimes it was not fun, like it was all sorts. And then sometimes it was a totally different experience. But these when we're fine tuning and getting like these cosmic tune ups, they can be deeply initiatory, and that then can also um, bring forth states of you know altered consciousness, evolutionary consciousness, seeing things that we didn't see before, kind of blasting us open from a myopic viewpoint into like a 360 where there's just like this perspective shift can be like that. And I'm reminded of the stories of the astronauts, like when they go into outer space, and there's they there is this overview effect is the term that was coined about this moment, like when you get up to outer space and you look back to the earth and you see this gorgeous blue fragile planet that is our home, and the whole mind just like all the bubbles are burst and the mind just expands like never before, and they call it this overview effect, and that it actually has a whole neurological experience, and then people come back and they are different.
Yeah.
And I find that in deep pilgrimage and going in these prayerful, humble ways and with gifts and with openness is like it just completely recalibrates and bursts a lot of myopic viewpoints and bubbles, and is like, okay, now let's shift and let's see it from this way. And we're not the same, and we undergo great initiatory experiences. And sometimes they're comfortable, and sometimes, many times, they're not.
Oh yeah. I often remind people who work with me, because I do deep core wounding, subconscious work, and work with plant medicines. And I just let people know, when you make a big prayer for your life, for things to be very different, you can either be patient for them to unfold, or they will, shift very quickly. And if if you stay attached and don't know how to surrender, it's going to be intense. And
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, when things fall apart, even like today, when I was like, oh, Sienna's, a little late logging in, and it's like, I love it. For me, I love it when things don't go as planned. So I'm like, it just reminds me I'm not in charge, and I can just sit back and surrender and just navigate.
Yeah. I was reminded, I was listening to Marianne Williamson somewhere, and I think was Marianne. She said, like when a little baby chick is in the egg and it's time to peck its way out, it doesn't just go like, oh, it's time, to peck my way out of the shell. There's like a whole series of events that happen inside the egg that are like noxious gases that are pushing on that little baby, like, get out, get out. It's time, you got to like go.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's the yoga tradition has this understanding, as well as priestess and into the conscious descent, like that there has to be this break from everything we know into a descent so that there can be a reclaiming and a reemergence in a way that there's never been before. And so I'm just reminded, like, as you were speaking, it's like, it's just not comfortable, usually.
Yeah, we like to
We
be comfortable.
transform, we transform
Yes.
at the growth edges,
Yeah.
and sometimes kicking and screaming, sometimes willingly, different ways.
Yes. And I feel like I'm a little bit of a spiritual sadist. I just love it, So I'm like, yeah, let's dive in. And I'm like, why doesn't everybody get how awesome this is? But, then
Yeah,
I,
like to show up for shadow work with a great big smile. It's like, yeah.
yeah. And then when I get overconfident in that, then I get a nice one that really reminds me to be humble about that. Well, there's something that you bring up about these pilgrimages and the connection with other cultures. Is my Elo'esh is a Hebrew name. I'm not Jewish. It came to me from source. I had visions of Kali come to me. I actually do a Kamakya practice every Friday that I was initiated in by, it's been a while. I think it's Aditi Devi.
Mm.
And so I feel a deep resonance. And, as a white woman with all these undeniable spiritual connections to other lineages, and being invited into many indigenous initiations, ceremonies, wisdom, teachings. What's the difference for you between appropriation and honoring, and just being in service to these different lineages?
Yeah, I mean, this is deep and essential. And I don't have all the answers, but I can just share, I don't know if I have any answers, but I will just share some current thoughts and feelings about this. So I take it very seriously. Cultural appropriation is real, and it causes a lot of harm, probably way more harm than we realize many times. And so for me, I would just begin with the real honesty and of my being, to be honest, transparent, and super vulnerable and deeply humble. I'm going to just keep coming back to being like really willing to listen, listen to understand, uh, and not listen to respond, and to listen and to stay super humble. This that there is cultural appropriation is real. Then there's what we could speak of as cultural appreciation.
Yeah.
And then there's cultural exchange. And then there's cultural restitution and reparations. And so these are all like degrees of what we're talking about. And some, appreciation is like to really show up in the way of deep honoring and wanting to learn, versus wanting to take something from a culture that isn't ours and then go commoditize it, profit, and make money, and which happens a lot very fast without any deep embodiment, understanding, blessings, or initiatory ways. And so this causes a lot of harm. But appreciation is like to really show up as a student, and the resonance of my being is calling me to this tradition, and I show up as a student, with gifts, and I want to learn, like this. And appropriation happens from a dominant culture. The dominant culture is the one that has access in that proximity, with power and privilege, and so it's dominant culture that creates the appropriation and then turns things into commodity quickly. Then there's really cultural appreciation, though, can leave us in a place where it's just too easy. Well, I'm showing up to appreciate the culture, not appropriate it, and then we can let ourselves off the hook, and in a certain way bypass the actual harm that we might be creating through appropriation, because doesn't cultural appreciation sound so nice, and puts us in a position of like, well, I'm appreciating, not appropriating, and sometimes it's a slippery slope, I would say. So then we have to, from my point of view, lean in more than we think we're ready to, and push that a little more and say, well, if I am in a uh, position that is more dominant culture position in relationship here, how am I willing to show up in a way that actually is a redistribution of power,
Mhm.
that is a building of relationships, that is not about being any type of like someone coming in to save or to help, but it has to be like we're going to work together in whatever ways we are to help redistribute power and make sure that we're doing it with the mindset of liberation for all. And so then we start coming into restitution and reparations and redistribution of power. Now this is lifelongs, many lives of
Yeah.
deep work. And here's where we really come into what I feel that the way of the priestess really knows is true interdependence,
Yeah.
not as some lofty um, word or concept or ideal, but actually, like, we actually really are all connected.
Yeah.
So, again, how do I want to show up in the way that I am accountable, and what companions do I have around me to help me stay accountable?
Mhm.
Because left to just my own mind, I might say, "Oh, well, I'm this is great. I'm appreciating this culture," but maybe I am causing harm. So we need friends. We need community. We
Mm.
need real collective. Um, we need to
Yes.
be a collective so that we can
Oh,
be accountable and with integrity together
yeah.
and call each other forward. And like, what are we really about? Let's go, let's do this together.
Mm. Yeah. That's another way that I really feel the sacred mirror with you is the necessity of healthy community that's co-creating to really bring everybody's gifts, wisdom, insights to the table. And one of the values I hold is that nobody's value or experience is any less than anybody else's. Like everybody's experience is very real. And instead of arguing or about whose is more right or justifying, to invite people to come with curiosity to understand each other so that we can expand how we see the world around us, how we can be more accepting and inclusive of those we're sitting at the table with and being able to invite more people to the table.
Mm.
Uh, what would we do without community?
Yeah, I mean, for me, community and collective is key. And that we really to welcome, to sincerely welcome each other in our voices and our gifts and what we each bring, because each of us is made, as we are, and it's a deep gift and a deep honor.
Mhm.
And to bring to get ourselves tuned in and tuned up and really in alignment, like the big alignment,
Yes.
and then to bring our gifts through and in connection with each other. That's everything. And I feel that as much as like the absolute disaster of the world in so many ways that's happening, there is simultaneously an emergence and a reemergence of a new kind of vision that people are moving towards each other
Yeah.
and with each other and thinking way out of the box and breaking the status quo and becoming, coming into global solidarity
Yeah.
with each other, and really doing this together. This is
Mhm.
this is what I wish for and what I call in every single day.
Beautiful. And Sianna, you have created a really big, beautiful community, both online and I know in person, although that was, some of that was put on hold for a while. And I know that building community feels like it's so essential right now, and many people are interested. And I'm curious if you have one particular insight or key for how to build safe, healthy, thriving community.
I'm just feeling into it.
Yeah, take your time.
This is something I contemplate, all the time. And I feel that one of the most important things is to be like in real integrity with myself, and from this place within myself to sincerely just, I'm a big heart wing person, so I like everything to do with heart wings, chemical heart wings, and to everyday practice to be rooted in the root of my own being, and to open up the alchemical heart wings to welcome people and to really welcome people as they are,
Mhm.
and to just welcome fully. All are welcome. And whoever shows up, then we meet each other in this open, loving, present, respectful way, and trust that we've been called together. And then we start leaning in and growing and sharing together. I think
Beautiful.
that the main thing I would say about community is to really to know that there's no one person who holds all the answers. It can never be like this. A community is a living, breathing um, ecosystem, like a forest, and all the beings working and being together, really being together. And when we're in a forest, and which is where I love to be, it's like to drop in with a forest is so sublime, because we're reminded, that the whole symphony is created by the whole ecosystem, and every little big, bold, inconspicuous, all of it is together and truly interdependent. That's the symphony. And so a community is like this. In the moment that any one of us might think that, oh, I'm, leading the community or this or that, it's not like that. I see it like a circle and spirals and all of that. One person steps in, uh, shares and helps grow the space. Then when it's their time, next they step out, next person in. Sometimes we come in together. It keeps, it's evolving and it shape shifts, and we keep remembering that we are a force together and not one being a force over.
And how we show up, that really, being able to show up when you're in a community that's about healing. Hurt people show up, and they need help, and it's not always easy to have the graciousness, the patience, the full open wings to receive, and to be able to do that, to be a true leader, being able to really do that and embrace everyone in a good way. It requires a lot of inner work. So it doesn't surprise me that you're the founder of Rasa Yoga. A practice of building that inner strength and flexibility and expansiveness and groundedness. And I want to thank you for showing up today, and ask if there's anything more that you'd like to share with our audience
Well,
on your
I
heart.
always like to just take a moment, like in the shared space. Um, what I really feel is like the ritual and the rhythm in the way of where we find ourselves together, and to really honor this particular potent timing of Friday, that is day of the goddess and governed by Venus. And you spoke of your Kamakia practices on Friday, and to just honor that we gathered on this Friday in the growing of the moonlight, and tomorrow being Juneteenth, and that President Biden just signed the bill yesterday for Juneteenth to be a national federal holiday to really honor true freedom and the true independence of all people. And in that Opal Lee, I just love this Opal Lee. She's really the grandmother of Juneteenth. She's 94 years old right now, and she has her lifelong mission was for Juneteenth to truly be a national federal holiday, and to just really honor this beacon and this luminary, and that it happens. This is a huge victory, not just in the United States, but I really feel for the world. And that the Emancipation Proclamation took 2.5 years for the enslaved peoples of Texas to know that that slavery was abolished. 2.5 years. And so Opal Lee, she's been walking these 2.5 mile circuits in all these cities to raise awareness in honor of the 2.5 years. And yesterday, that this triumph really happened. And so I just honoring this great woman and grandmother of Juneteenth. And then here we are moving to summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and to the peak of, this light and the radiance of our being. And so I might like to just chant the Gayatri mantra in honor of the radiance and mind, body, and heart, the true shimmering of our being when we say yes to fully showing up and undergoing the great alchemical journey of our being many, many times. And that we are reclaiming and reimagining and rebirthing a new paradigm here on earth and in service together. May it be so, and so it is.
So it is.
Om Bhur Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dio Hyo Na Prachodayat. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And the final thing that's just flying through is that whoever we are and wherever our origins are and our ethnicities and our bloodlines, may we each take a very sacred turn to where we've come from and through our own ancestry. And we may feel resonances with all various spiritual traditions, and may we turn towards the very place that we came and really lean into that, understand and honor where we've come from in our own personal ancestry too. That's just, I think my grandmother was my Irish grandmother is right here, being a champion as she is for me.
Yes, honor. Thank you. Honor our ancestry. Tune in to them. They have wisdom for us. And I wanted to also just acknowledge I'm here on Wapo land in Napa County, and grateful for the sacred relationship with this land. So thankful for you being here, Sianna. I know that your assistant sent probably information about your free gift. We had a little Mercury in retrograde hiccup, and instead of getting distracted with me trying to find that and get it, we will post it on the comments of Inalienable Sovereignty. It's a group on Facebook. And so grateful to have you here, and for all of you tuning in. The gift from Inalienable Sovereignty we can't show up listening to our intuition and being in service to source if we are locked into anxiety and scarcity and survival. And there is a free guided meditation for you called Emerging Through Crisis that I created to support us in healing up our own trauma that we carry within us so that we can be of greater service to those around us. And that will also be posted in the comments, available to you, and grateful again for your participation. Thank you, Sianna. Thank you, Kelsey, my lovely assistant. And bless your life, bless your journey. And until next time, everybody, may the source be with you.
Thanks. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Kelsey. Thank you, everyone. So much love.
Much love.